I'm a little bummed we didn't make a single sink or swim joke.
We're gonna make them all in the round table. Yeah. We're here in Tucson, Arizona with the $1,500 Diamondback Sinker, one of 2 field test bikes on 27.5-inch wheels. Diamondback says that it's designed to be a versatile trail rig, and to do that job, it gets a 140mm travel fork, dropper post, and a 12-speed drivetrain that are all hung off an aluminum frame with a boost through axle. And as for the geometry, it's on the more conservative side of things, but we'll see what that means on the trail. The build includes a 140mm travel Recon RL fork, and the drivetrain is SRAM's entry-level 12-speed SX group, while a set of Shimano's MT500 hydraulic brakes slow the bike down. It also comes with a dropper post, which is great to see at this price point.
Those are the details on the Sinker. Let's dig into some ride impressions, starting, of course, with how it climbs. Alicia, how'd you find this bike?
I found this bike to climb okay, but not great. I'd say the relatively short wheelbase on it, combined with the really big, clunky 2.8-inch tires, just felt a little bit like the bike was dragging and felt slow and not easy to maneuver, especially with the climbs we have here in Tucson where it's really ledgy and awkward and traction's hard to come by. A lot of things about the bike, the weight, the shortish wheelbase, the big tires, just meant that it felt like more trouble than help most of the time.
Did you find a similar thing?
Yeah, I would agree. There's definitely a place where this thing climbs well, but it's not in Tucson and it's not on really rough, rocky trails. The bike felt unstable to me. It felt quite short. And I'm sure those big tires helped, but I tell you, it always felt like I had less traction on this bike than the other bikes. It felt like I was perched over top with the wheels quite close, where compare that to the Salsa. I mean, there's a big difference. Climbing the Salsa felt much more stable and I was flailing around less than usual, that's for sure.
I'm curious about your opinion. You said that the big wheels helped, the big tires helped. Mm-hmm. I fully disagree because I just think that the traction gained there is totally outweighed by the extra weight and the clunkiness.
So this isn't the only bike we have with 2.8-inch tires. We also have the Commencal Meta, and you've ridden both of them. So Did you find the Meta you got along with the bigger tires better on the Commencal?
Yeah, I actually did. I think I don't hate plus tires as a blanket statement. I just hate them in some scenarios when the bike is too heavy and too clunky. I think it just adds to the problem.
Yeah, I think it's around almost 3 pounds weight difference between the Sinker and the Commencal, which is pretty significant.
For a bike that's exactly the same price, that's wild.
This is Mishka. Please subscribe to Beta so I can afford to feed her. She eats a lot, and right now the Beta membership is half off. It's only $24 a year. Even Mishka could afford that. Yeah.
All right, so climbing doesn't sound like it was that amazing. Did things turn around on the descents?
They didn't for me, no. Again, I felt a lot of the same things that I felt when I was climbing. The bike consistently felt unstable to me. It felt skittery. It felt like the traction was just on or off. And keep in mind, we were riding all the other bikes on this same trail, and I didn't really get that feeling from it. So yeah. Did you have any really scary moments on the Sinker where you were close to crashing?
I put my arm and hand through, I think, 3 cacti on one descent. It was one of those descents that I got to the bottom and was just like, this is bad.
Yeah, we should mention that traction here is pretty questionable at the best of times sometimes. So yeah, there were times when the bike, it just felt like it didn't work, and that's not what I want in a bike. I want a bike that gives me confidence, and I didn't find the confidence in this. I never felt comfortable on it.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because the geometry, it's modern-ish. You look at it and it's a little bit steeper, a little bit shorter than some of the bikes, but there's not one number that kind of stands out as being like, oh, that's the one we can pinpoint to making the issue. The chainstays, they're a little bit longer than some of the other ones. I think they're 435 millimeters, which on full suspension bike, that's not that long, but on a bike with 27.5-inch wheels, they're a little bit long, but even that, it seems like, talking with both of you, it didn't seem like there's one particular thing that could be changed to totally fix the bike. It's kind of a combination.
Yeah, I think this is basically the sum of the package, to be honest with you.
Let's move on from the ride impressions to some talk about the components. Let's start with the brakes. On some of these bikes, the brakes sort of work-ish, but on this one, it sounds like it was maybe a little bit different. How'd you find them, Alicia?
I thought they were totally adequate for what the bike is. I think it's the Shimano MT500s on there, and they're not amazing. They're not amazing in any respect, really, but they're fine. They work, and for what you're gonna ride the bike down and the speeds you're gonna go, they'll stop you.
That sounds good-ish, maybe?
To be fair, I mean, they have much more initial bite than some of the other brakes we have
They actually
here.
do, yeah.
Yeah, and that really helps on the trail.
I was incredibly disappointed by some of the brakes we had here on test. I'm gonna shout out the ones on the Kona, the Alhangas, along with the Tektros on the Specialized, actually. These were significantly better than either of those.
All right, we talked about how those Plus tires handled on the trail, but let's rewind the tape a little bit and talk about setup. I heard some loud swearing and I saw a lot of sealant spilled in the garage.
Never.
How'd that go?
That was frustrating. Diamondback says these things are tubeless ready. They're most definitely not tubeless ready. The rims don't come taped. The tires fit so loose that I had to use 3/4 of a roll of Gorilla Tape on each end, and the damn things still leaked out of the rim joint. So we eventually got these things seated, but it's most definitely not tubeless ready. And if you're riding this bike in a place like Tucson, or really anywhere, like everybody should be running tubeless. It's better. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard. Yeah.
So the tire setup might not be ideal, but one nice thing about this bike is that it does have a dropper post. However, it's not totally perfect.
Yeah, it is great to start off with that it has a dropper post. It just is, it would be nice to have more than 125 millimeters of travel. And so if I were to own this bike, I would definitely put a longer dropper on it pretty much immediately. However, the Commensal that we talked about earlier costs the same amount of money and doesn't have a dropper, so Diamondback does have a little bit of an edge with the dropper post.
Let's move on to some frame notes. You know, with this bike, there's some things that's a little rough around the edges. And we have some of these frames that they would be a lot more expensive bike, but we are talking about budget bikes, and this bike, the frame kind of looks budget. I noticed you riding around with some electrical tape. Oh, man.
Yeah. So the cables are external. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But they go on the underside of the down tube. And there's also nothing really wrong with that either, but it means that if you're gonna hang this bike over a tailgate, you might damage those cables. So that is something to keep in mind. They just should be routed somewhere else. Also, the bike comes with these little plastic clips to hold them on. Those rattled off, I think, by the time I got to the end of the driveway. And we ended up having to use some tape, but of course you can use zip ties or whatever. Kaz, the other thing that I wanna mention, it has room for a second bottle cage on the seat tube, but there's no threaded holes for them. And I think that's just like a cost thing. It costs money to put those water bottle bosses in there, and they're not there.
Now it's time to talk about some time testing. How did those numbers look?
So I did the time testing for the hardtails, and the Diamondback actually placed 3rd out of 4 on the climbs, which did impress me a little bit. I kind of expected 4th out of 4, but maybe I was extra inspired on it. Then when it came time to descend, it was 4th out of 4 bikes, and when we combined all the times together, it was in 3rd. Regardless of what the times say, we never really got to feel comfortable on it.
So this sinker is $1,500. Let's take a little bit deeper dive into the rest of Diamondback's lineup. Are there other ones that might pose a better value?
Well, the dive isn't that deep, to be honest with you, Kaz. This is actually Diamondback's most expensive aluminum hardtail that retails for $1,500 American. So that's it. You're not gonna get a nicer one. But you can definitely spend more money if you wanted to, Alicia.
Yeah, I mean, you could go for the next one up in the line, which is the Sinker Carbon, and that costs $3,650. I would say it's not technically a value bike.
I mean, it's not a value bike. Let's just say that's if you're jumping up to $3,650, that's a lot of money. We've got some really good full suspension bikes for that much. So if you have that much money in your pocket, probably look at one of those. But so either way, this is the top of the line aluminum model in Diamondback's lineup. Mr. Cheery, what do you have? Is there a pro with this bike?
I mean, $1,500 is a lot of money. Like, there's no two ways about it. But it's also a way to get into mountain biking. And granted, like if you see yourself progressing more in this sport, upgrading your bike, well, the Sinker is probably not for you.
Those are the pros. Let's move on to the cons. I feel like we've already talked about a fair number of them, but is there any one in particular that stands out, Alicia?
I think the biggest thing is just the competition is really stiff. I mean, we have another bike on test that costs the same exact amount and essentially tries to do the same thing, but does it better. And so with bikes out there that do have more updated geometry and better spec, it's hard to recommend choosing this one over the competition. All
right, let's close this out. Who exactly is this bike for? Levy, what do you think?
This bike is for somebody who's got $1,500 to spend, and that's probably all they're going to spend on the mountain bike. And maybe they don't see themselves getting into it too hard. Like if you don't see yourself going out there and doing big jumps or riding all day, there's probably nothing wrong with this bike, despite us sitting here and harping on it forever. That said, there are better options for $1,500, like you said, Alicia. So it's kind of a tough sell, I'm not gonna lie.
I would add though that there's not too big a problem with just getting this as a cruise around in your local trail system bike. It can do cruisy rides just fine. It has driver post, it has the plus tires, so if you're into not riding too fast and into comfort, this could be a decent option for you.
That's it for the Diamondback Sinker. Stay tuned for more videos from the Pinkbike field test here in Tucson, Arizona. Thanks for watching.